Article 8 is judiciary, and judiciary is represented by the Supreme Court and all other courts of first instance, the Court of Appeal, and other quasi-judicial branch like the Ombudsman and the Sandigan Bayan, which also has same function. The Supreme Court is the highest court, and its decision is final and executory. It is the other branch of the government by which its function is to ensure that those laws that had been created by the legislative branch or issued by the executive branch are in consonant with the provisions of the Constitution. So its primary function is to ensure the constitutionality or legality of any laws that will be implemented in our government. The Supreme Court is composed of 15 membership, 1 Chief Justice, and 14 associate justices, and they may decide cases in bank, where all the 15 will decide, or by division of 3, or by division of 5 membership. And for the qualifications of the members of the Supreme Court, one of the qualification, of course, is that they may they should be a natural born Filipino citizen. So no naturalized Filipino citizen could be appointed as member or Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Then another qualification, they must be a member of the IBP or Integrated Bar of the Philippines for at least 15 years, or practicing law for at least 15 years, or being a judge of lower court. Then another qualification is that they must be a person of intelligence, honesty, integrity, and other factors that should be possessed by those that would be appointed as member of the judiciary. Then, of course, aside from the function of the Supreme Court of ensuring the legality of any law that will be implemented in our government, they're also in charge for judicial review. So there are those cases that had been decided in the lower court and still could be brought into the Supreme Court for an appeal after exhausting the different laws or the different function of the lower court, like for example, the RTC and Court of Appeal. The last resort is the Supreme Court. So until after na Supreme Court ang mag-decide ng case, ay pwede pa rin siyang iapila. But pag Supreme Court na ang nag-decide, it is final and executory. And there are requisites for judicial review. The first one is an actual case or controversy. So cases that question for a constitutional rights or legal rights could be taken for an appeal in the Supreme Court. So another is that if it is a question of jurisdiction, halimbawa, a case that had been decided by the Civil Service Commission or by Ombudsman, and if there is a question for the jurisdiction for such case, na halimbawa, hindi daw siya dapat under ng Ombudsman yung kaso o ng Civil Service Commission, pwede siyang dalhin for an appeal sa Supreme Court. Even those cases that have been decided by the Court of Appeal. But of course, there are some requirements to take an appeal. Like for example, kailangan ay meron ng sapat na ebidensya or bagong ebidensya that will be presented para ito ay tanggapin ng Supreme Court na pwede talaga siyang iapila. Alright, for the other functions of the Supreme Court, yeah, so it's an original, the original jurisdiction is to exercise original jurisdiction over cases affecting ambassadors, public ministers, consuls, and over petitions for certiorari, prohibition, mandamus, quorum and habeas corpus. So, doon sa powers ng President, kung naalala nyo, ay one of the power of the President is to appoint foreign ministers, ambassadors, consuls, charge d'affaires, and others. And etong mga taong ito na ina-appoint ng President as foreign ministers, ambassadors, or consuls, they enjoy immunity from suit while serving as a representative of our country. So, if ever that nagkaroon sila ng kaso, ay kailangan muna silang i-recall ng President, i-recall yung kanilang appointment as representative of our country, at saka lang sila pwedeng kasuhan. And cases that involves this persona can only be tried by the Supreme Court, not by the Court of Appeal and other lower courts. So, Supreme Court lang pwedeng dalhin yung kaso na involved by isang ambassador or consul. Now, we also have an original jurisdiction of Supreme Court on cases of certiorari, prohibition, mandamus, quorum, and habeas corpus. Habeas corpus means to produce the body. Those person na kailang mag-appear before a court. Kung naalala niyo yung mga kaso ng diseparisado, yung mga nawawalang estudyante, kung saan yung parents ay nagpa-file ng petition for habeas corpus so that the Supreme Court would issue an order for such person to appear before a court. Then we have also certiorari, where the Supreme Court would have to give an order to a lower court for them to produce and submit the documents of a certain case for a review. So, pag Supreme Court na ang nag-order sa lower court na kailangang isubmit nila yung lahat ng credentials ng isang kaso para ito ma-review. Especially those cases kung saan ang final verdict ng lower court ay death or reclusion perpetua. So automatically, it is being reviewed by the Supreme Court. Pag capital punishment ang ibinigay ng lower court. Then when we say prohibition, that is an order coming from the Supreme Court so that a corporation, a company, or institution would desist to perform a certain act, prohibiting them to perform a certain function. While opposite of that is mandamus, kung saan the Supreme Court could give an order for the institution, for a corporation, for a person to perform a certain act in accordance to what is required by law. Then, in terms of quo warranto, it is an order coming from the Supreme Court, similar to that when the court would give an order to sequester properties of a person having this so-called ill-gotten wealth, unexplainable wealth, unexplainable source of assets. Then, of course, yung appellate jurisdiction ng Supreme Court kung saan ay pwedeng i-apela yung mga cases. So, the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, they review, revise, reverse, modify, or affirm on appeal or certiorari as the law or the rules of court may provide final judgment and orders of lower courts in first, all cases in which the constitutionality or validity of any treaty, international or executive agreement, law, presidential decree, proclamation order, instruction, ordinance, or regulations is in question. So sinabi ko kanina na yung mga guidelines na pinalabas ng presidente, executive order, administrative order, presidential decree could be reviewed by the Supreme Court. Kasi sila nga yung nagsisigurado na lahat ng batas na ina-apply o ia-apply sa ating government ay hindi in violation of any provision in our Constitution. Then, if ever the Philippine government would enter into a treaty, although meron niya ng pagpayag dapat ng 2/3 of all the members of the Senate, whenever the Philippine government would have to enter into a treaty represented by the President, still it could be reviewed by the Supreme Court. Then, cases involving the legality of any tax imposed, assessment, or toll, and any penalty imposed in relation thereto. So kung masyadong excessive yung fines na binigay ng lower court, then of course cases kung saan in question ang jurisdiction ng lower court. So subject for appeal pa rin yun. Right. For other function of the Supreme Court, temporary assignment of judges. So, halimbawang nagkaroon ng vacancy or may namatay na judge at o kaya nag-resign, the Supreme Court would have to appoint temporary judges of lower court for at least 6 months if without the consent of the judge. Kasi may mga time na ayaw ng judge na ma-appoint halimbawa sa ganitong lugar, halimbawa sa Mindanao kung saan may kaguluhan, tapos ayaw ng judge, at least they are required to assume into office for at least 6 months. Then, of course, the Supreme Court would appoint employees in the lower court, employees in the judiciary, employees in the lower court, and the Supreme Court have an administrative supervision over the courts and all the personnel thereof. So, yung mga employees sa judiciary, ang nag-a-appoint niyan ay sa Supreme Court. Although they must also satisfy the requirements set by the Civil Service Commission, pero meron ng requirement also, like for example, stenographer and court interpreter. So sila yung nag-a-appoint niyan kasi hindi yan yung qualifications nila ay hindi lang basta-basta katulad ng isinasaad sa Civil Service Commission requirements na if you are a passer of the CSC professional exam, you could be appointed in any government office. But in a court, may special qualifications sila. That is why sila yung nag-a-appoint ng kanilang mga empleyado na kailangan ng special skills to perform a function within a court. Alright. Isa pa rin sa power ng Supreme Court is to order for a change of venue of a trial. So, Supreme Court lang ang pwede na magbigay ng order para mag-change ng venue ng trial ng isang kaso. And that is possible if, for example, yung party sa kaso ay may threat o kaya yung may threat sa buhay ng judge na may hawak ng kaso. Especially yung mga celebrated case or yung mga cases that involve some celebrity or big personalities. All right. As I have mentioned that membership in the Supreme Court is composed of 1 Chief Justice and 14 Associate Justices. The Chief Justice and the first 4 Associate Justices would serve for 7 years without reappointment. The other 5 would serve for 5 years, and the other 5 would serve for 3 years. So they have a staggered term of office. Hindi sila sabay-sabay, hindi sabay-sabay na nag-expired yung kanilang term. So that whenever the first 5 would expire their term, at least meron pang natitirang 10. So, hindi mapaparalyze yung function ng branch. And members of the Supreme Court are appointed by the President upon the recommendation of the Judicial and Bar Council. That is why those who will be appointed must be a member of the Judicial and Bar Council. So they scrutinize the qualifications of those who will be appointed as an Associate Justice and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court or members of the Supreme Court would have other functions, like for example, if any of those officials in the government would have to undergo impeachment trial, members of the Supreme Court are part for that adjudication. So the Chief Justice, unless yung Chief Justice mismo ang ini-impeach, of course, they participate in the trial as they part of the jury. So, di ba, in an impeachment proceedings, the lower house would initiate the impeachment. They prepare and submit the documents for the trial, and the Senate, members of the Senate and members of the judiciary would serve as the jury to hear and decide on that impeachment case. Is there any question concerning this Article 8, which is the powers and functions of the judiciary? No question?
None po, ma'am.
All right. So if you don't have any question, we go on further to Article 9, the Constitutional Commission. So the Constitutional Commission, as stated in the Constitution, is composed of 3 independent commissions: the Civil Service Commission, the Commission on Election, and the Commission on Audit.